so much for doing this. I had the idea relatively last minute because with Ozempic getting more and more attention, and I really think it was the Golden Globes that did it in a way, because Oprah, for instance, is looking very svelte these days. And then Christina Applegate made the joke when she was accepting an Emmy Award about, body not sponsored by Ozempic or something like that. And it's just become so incredibly mainstream. I'm getting a lot of questions about it. I have coaching clients that are taking Ozempic. Primarily for diabetes, which is the reason that it was first developed, and then the weight loss, effect obviously, blew up, and it's going to be very popular and all of those things. But your questions are the reason I decided to do this. So thank you for your great questions. I'm Stephanie Meyer, which I'm sure you know. My business is called Project Vibrancy. And it has a few aspects to it, all of them related to food and all of them related to appetite in a lot of ways. And so that makes talking about Ozempic and the effect that it creates relevant, although my angle is food, of course. So primarily, I spend my days doing this, sitting on Zoom and working with clients, coaching and teaching them, how to do exactly sort of this, how to incorporate, foods similar to this, not from this GLP-1 angle. This will be a new way of talking about it. And so if you already are my client, we haven't had the conversations about food and satiety and from this angle before, so I'm excited to do this. But I'm also a recipe developer. I've, had a food blog since 2006, and I've been developing healthy recipes for a long, long time. And I'm a cooking instructor. I, before the pandemic, taught cooking classes in person quite a lot, and then switched over to teaching on Zoom. And I've continued to do that since the pandemic. So, needless to say, I love to talk about food. And my initial angle when I started out as a blogger was moderation. And it's actually pretty funny to go back and read some of those old blog posts, because I was getting into recipe development. I was doing all this cooking, and I was realizing that it was really changing my relationship with food in ways that I didn't super love. I was spending more time around food. I was eating more food. It was affecting my health. It was affecting my weight. And so I started this blog as sort of a conversation around, where am I going to find moderation in this world? Like, where am I going to find moderation in the world of restaurants and teaching cooking and being around food all day? And that was how it began. And then my health intervened, and I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroid disease, and that sort of took away a lot of the things that I was even intellectually struggling with, and put me on a very clear path to figure out healthy food is going to be the way. Let's do this. Let's make it delicious. Let's make it really fun. And that was the switch in my blog and in my journey and in my career. And that happened around 2010. So since 2010, I've been continuing to develop recipes. I've been continuing to talk about health. And it's just gotten more and more interesting, and I've gotten more and more clear about how I want to talk about it. There are a lot of ways to talk about health, and I'm going to open by reading an email that I received this morning, because it really grabbed me. It really grabbed my attention. I'm a very positive person, so if you follow me on social media and if you work with me as a coach, I love to laugh. I think food is fun. I, think it's really sensual, as in really fun to engage all the senses. Obviously, it's fun to feed other people. I find cooking relaxing. And so a lot of what I talk about is really positive. And sometimes I realize that I don't talk about the flip side. And I don't want to start us off in a super negative way, but this email just grabbed me because it did level set me into remembering that, yes, food is fun. Yes, food is delicious. I love talking about it, but it is so imperative to health. And I don't want to talk about appetite. I don't want to talk about Ozempic without without setting the stage for how important and imperative food is for our health. So that's what I'm going to read for you. So this is by a guy named Michael Easter. And I stumbled upon him. He wrote a book called The Comfort Crisis. And I listened to it on Audible during the pandemic. And it's a great read. I highly recommend it. He really just goes into how our modern society and all of the comforts that we've created for ourselves have had a negative impact on our health, physically and our mental health, and that we need some challenge in our life in order to feel productive and happy and good about ourselves and confident and all of those things. And he's a journalist. He has a great way of communicating. Highly recommend it. So if you want a really cool book to listen to, I think he did a great job on Audible with it. And so I follow him on Instagram now, and I subscribe to his emails. And he's doing kind of a challenge that he's rolling out over email, and he's talking about a native population that still is eating their native diet. There are so few left in the world, and they're being highly studied, and they have particular interest because they are completely devoid of cardiovascular disease. And so there's a lot to learn as quickly as possible about them, because the thing that happens with these native populations is that as they come into contact with the world, then our modern food starts to make its way into their food, and then their health falls apart. And that hasn't happened yet. So there's a lot of exciting stuff, and it's really interesting to read. I would sign up for the emails. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is the one he sent this morning, which is this. Medical science is great. It's helped people die less often from other maladies like cancer, lung disease, car and work accidents, etc. But it has trouble keeping up with cardiovascular disease. The disease has been surging across the globe, spreading into new places and more people. Its rates dropped as people began smoking less, and we invented the medication statins. But it's now cranking back up. Globally, it kills 50% more people today than in 1990. That figure outpaces population growth. The numbers are savage. In America, cardiovascular disease kills one of us every 34 seconds. Even the young are at increasing risk. So I wanted to touch on this because it's so important for our children. At about 30% of all heart attack patients today are between 35 and 54 years old. Now 40% of all people who die before turning 70 die of cardiovascular disease. So it is cardiovascular disease that kills us. And he, as a journalist, goes on to say that the world's largest and most read media outlets run nearly 10-fold more headlines about cancer, 24-fold more headlines about murder and terrorism. Yet the average American is 50% and 38% times more likely to die of cardiovascular disease than by cancer or homicide, respectively, which means that we're fretting about the wrong things. So I say all of that just because I want to set the stage for how important it is, how important what we eat is, because the number one cause of cardiovascular disease is diet. Certainly other lifestyle factors matter. I mean, smoking obviously is a huge one, stress, sleep, all of those things. But food is the number one thing, and we can do something about that. And this conversation fits with that. One of the things that Ozempic is going to end up being studied for, it began as a diabetes drug, and then it had this amazing effect on appetite, and that was a really big discovery. But now they're finding that it's actually bringing down cardiovascular risk. It also brings down risk for cancer. It's not understood exactly how it happens. All we know is that there is this interaction between the food that we eat and our physical health, and we don't quite understand how it all works, which is why you get 1,000 million confusing messages on social media. But it matters. And so I just wanted to begin by saying that, which is much more like pessimistic and dark than I usually am. But I think it's really important, and it does, it lends a clearer path and motivation for the choices that we make. And then I like to talk about it I mean, I could talk about cardiovascular disease and I could talk about diabetes because, of course, they're utterly influenced by food. I like to come at it from appetite because to me, that's almost like the next most important step, like the base step. Because if you're hungry all the time, it becomes impossible to make good decisions about food. We all, of course, have willpower and expend willpower, and that's helpful to know how to do and to strengthen. But before that, I like to get people full because when you're full, you make different decisions. And Ozempic is just proving this times 1,000. So I put this in the email. I'm not implying that these foods are as powerful or have the same effect as the drug does. The drug Ozempic is, very powerful. But these foods mimic this effect in a softer way, and so it's absolutely worth knowing how to employ them, especially if you're someone who struggles with hunger and who struggles with feeling full at the end of a meal that should have had the right amount of calories in it. So when people take Ozempic, they have no appetite anymore. I mean, almost for some people, too much of a degree. And what we're learning from that is that the foods that are really commonly eaten, probably not by you. Like if you're following me, I suspect that you already have a pretty healthy way of eating. But let's just zoom out and talk about the average American who is eating, 60% of their calories from ultra processed food. And ultra processed food is, crackers, chips, pizza, fast food, anything that comes in a box, anything that comes from a fast food restaurant. And that's where the majority of American calories come from. We know that these foods do really bad things to our health. Um, we know that these foods are very delicious. And we know that these foods are relatively inexpensive compared to, their better, more nutritious counterparts. So that makes it it makes it make sense why it makes up 60% of calories. It also means that if you don't want to walk that path, that you almost have to be kind of a rebel. So just being here and learning about this is a rebellious act and, really out of the mainstream. And I think that's very cool. These native populations that adopt slowly over time the more modern diet are kind of these unfortunate perfect studies. We see that people who are eating their native diet have amazing health, great bone health, great gut health, no cardiovascular disease, no diabetes. And then as soon as these modern foods come into their diet, all of their health benefits fall away. They develop cardiovascular disease, they develop diabetes, they start to look like less, they start to gain weight. So there's something about processed food that is really messing with human health. And it's obviously being constantly studied and talked about. Um, you know, is it unhealthy fats? Yes. Is it the processed flour and sugar? Yes. Is it messing with gut health? Yes. Is it having an interaction with our immune system and creating inflammation? Yes. It's like all of those things all happening at the same time. So some people talk about, that it's the sugar. Some people talk about it as the fat. We all know those books. They're a little bit right, but maybe don't have the whole picture because we just don't know. All we know is that avoiding them to the best of our ability is really beneficial. And the other thing we know about these foods is that they're not filling enough per calorie. So in one of the other emails that Michael Easter sent, he gives an example of people that were, in a locked ward. These are very rare nutrition studies because they're very expensive to conduct and nobody really wants to do them. But people were, controlled. Their food was very controlled. And there was a group of people that were given food that was natural and whole. And then the other group was only given ultra processed food, and people were allowed to eat to satiety. And every single person who ate the ultra processed food overconsumed calories and gained weight. And every person who ate the unprocessed food and was allowed to eat to satiety did not gain weight or lose weight. And that was a really well done experiment because it showed that there's something about the processing that is having this really negative effect on not just health, but appetite. So, part of what these foods don't create enough of is satiety hormones. Ozempic acts like a satiety hormone. There's a specific hormone called GLP-1 that is in the news a lot. Ozempic and the other drugs like it are called GLP-1 agonists. They're not exactly GLP-1, but they're close enough that they act the way that GLP-1 does in our bodies. And the way that we make GLP-1 is in our gut in response to certain foods. And it turns out certain bacteria. So, what we want to harness is that GLP-1 effect. And I'm not saying that it's a replacement for Ozempic. I think Ozempic actually is really helping people understand what obesity is. Obesity is turning out to be a disease of appetite hormones. I mean that in it's a lot of other things, but it is definitely the Ozempic phenomenon is showing that people with obesity have dysregulated appetite hormones, and once that system breaks, it's very hard to fix it. And that's why treating obesity is really difficult. The things that are proven to help treat obesity are exactly the foods that we're going to talk about, and Ozempic just amplifies that effect. So, for the clients that I have who are taking it, and other people, drugs like this have big side effects. It's not that fun to take Ozempic. It has to be injected. Most of the other ones that work the same way have to be injected too. I think there's one that's a pill form now, but for the most part, it's an injectable drug. It requires a prescription. Nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, and in some ways a loss of joy. We're wired to have a lot of joy in eating and in looking forward to a meal. And a lot of people find it very depressing to have that go away. It's like, oh, 3 times a day for most people, we get to experience the joy of eating food that we enjoy. And when your appetite goes away, I've certainly experienced this with illness. I had COVID a couple weeks ago, and the first thing that happens for me is my appetite's just gone. Because your sense of smell is affected, your sense of taste is affected, and there is a loss of pleasure that gets taken out of the day. So people really experience that in a big way. So it's not for everyone, and I think that's that's a good thing, and it's not a good thing. I think it's not a good thing for people who are who need to lose 10 pounds or something like that and are looking for an Ozempic prescription. Like, maybe that's not really where you want to go. And there are doctors out there who I think are becoming willing to prescribe it even for little bits of weight loss. It's probably not effective for that. And that means, for our purposes, that learning to how to harness these foods to get that effect in a gentler way, in a way that's pleasurable, in a way that actually boosts your health, because some of the downsides of Ozempic potentially hasn't been around long enough, already being studied. But theoretically, if you don't eat a lot, malnutrition becomes potentially an issue. If you don't eat enough protein, muscle wasting becomes potentially an issue. Maybe it won't happen. There's plenty to learn about these drugs, and there's plenty of benefits to solving obesity. So it's probably going to be a trade-off. But learning how to use these foods for people who want to lose not, dramatic amounts of weight, let's say not more than 50 pounds or maybe 100 pounds. is a great idea. And I think that understanding GLP-1 is opening up a whole new way for people like me to talk with clients about what creates appetite suppression. And I hope that it gives people, the more knowledge you have, the more motivation you have. Sometimes when you're eating something that, is supposedly healthy and you don't really know why, it's not that motivating. I find it very motivating to know when I eat this food, it's creating this response. I like knowing that it supports my healthy gut bacteria. I like knowing that, it lowers my risk for macular degeneration. My mom died of cardiovascular disease a couple of months ago. She suffered, for years with a terrible disease. I like knowing that the choices that I'm making are going to lower my risk for cardiovascular disease. And in this sense, knowing that the foods that you're choosing to eat and the way that you're choosing to eat them are literally creating more satiety and are literally increasing your chances for either losing weight or keeping your preferred weight, um, is more motivating. So it just gives us another reason to focus on them and another reason to talk about them. And as you'll see, it's not going to be, wildly different foods than we've talked about before, or that I talk about on a regular basis. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is Stephanie, Stephanie, Meyer, And I share a lot, particularly in Instagram stories, about a lot of these foods, about the benefits of whole foods. I do it for motivation, so that you're like, okay, am I going to bother to eat, some broccoli with dinner tonight? Yes, I'm going to take that extra step because one, it's going to make me full tomorrow. Two, it's good for my gut bacteria. Three, it's great for liver function. Four, it supports, healthy vision. All of those things, and I am happy to sort of be that food cheerleader for you. So make sure that you follow me on Instagram because I share a lot of this there. But the thing about Ozempic is it obviously tricks your body into thinking that you've already eaten. Because when you do eat, and when you do eat these particular foods, your body recognizes certain nutrients in the foods and then secretes a certain level of GLP-1. Eating, let's say, potato chips. They're notoriously not particularly filling per calorie. You would have to eat a lot of potato chips to trigger a secretion, an adequate secretion of GLP-1 and other satiety hormones. There are other satiety hormones, by the way, not just GLP-1. If you eat boiled potato, GLP-1 secretion happens much more quickly at much fewer calories. So knowing that points us away for another 50 great reasons away from those ultra processed foods. You're just not going to get the appropriate GLP-1 secretion if you're eating ultra processed foods. You're also not going to get or understand or feel appropriate GLP-1 secretion if you eat really fast. And we kind of already knew this. People had noticed, nutritionists and health researchers had noticed over time that people who eat fast tend to weigh more than people who eat slowly, without fully understanding why, without fully understanding that, oh, it is not just your body recognizing that there's food in your stomach. It's actually the secretion of these particular hormones that shut your appetite down. I am so guilty of this. I eat fast. I find pleasure in eating fast. There's something about it that I really enjoy. So I have to work very, very hard at it. And I fail a lot of the time. But of course, what happens is that when you eat more slowly, then it gives your body time to recognize the food, make a judgment. Obviously, I'm using brain terminology related to hormone secretion, but you'll forgive me for that. Make a judgment about what nutrients and what type of food this is, and then make a call about how much GLP-1 to secrete and how many other satiety hormones to secrete. That takes time. And so the maybe maybe more important even than the foods that you eat is to slow down, chew carefully, and to pay attention to how much you're enjoying the food. There is something about deliciousness and the pleasure of eating that boosts satiety and that boosts the secretion of GLP-1, which I think is really cool. So, whole foods like salads and nuts and seeds and, steak take more time to eat. Foods like smoothies and soda and, puddings and desserts don't take very long to eat. And so, again, there's another check in the column, for whole food because it does just naturally slow you down. But the more you can pay attention to that, the better. Um, Another trick before the foods is to be well hydrated. So, again, nutritionists and people who help people lose weight have noticed for many years that when people drink more water, it helps them lose weight. And there were lots of reasons that were, theorized, and maybe they're all true. It doesn't have to be just one reason, that you're using your nutrients better, that it takes up room in your stomach, that you have more energy so that you make better decisions about what you're going to eat. But it turns out that people who are dehydrated secrete less GLP-1, and that shows up as hunger. So it's maybe not that the water is filling your stomach, it's just that dehydration creates a lower secretion of GLP-1, and then you end up being hungry. So being well hydrated is, theoretically helps with weight loss. And now we're understanding at least one more concrete reason why. One of the ways that I help myself drink more water is that I add a little bit of electrolyte powder to water. There's something about it having a little bit of flavor that does help me drink more water. I don't fully dose it. So I buy, I think it's called Ultra or something like that. But there's like Element. You can experiment with different ones and find one that you like. They're available like in the protein powder section of grocery stores. And I don't put the full dose in there. I just put enough to add a little bit of flavor to the water. And for some reason, that reminds me to drink more of it. And then, of course, any other flavored, calorie-free beverages like teas and herbal teas, sparkling water, hop water, things like that, all count toward drinking enough water. And what's enough? I think 8 cups a day is good to shoot for. I think I've seen people get in trouble trying to do, like a whole gallon of water a day, which, some influencers recommend. I don't think that's necessary. I think anything between like 8 and 12 cups, you can kind of see how you feel, is more than adequate. And obviously, if it's summer and it's super hot outside, you're drinking more. If you're working out, you're drinking more. But anywhere in the 8 to 12 cup range is great. And if you're less than that, then that's probably not enough, and you can pay some attention to and work on it a little bit more. The other non-food way to boost GLP-1 is to exercise. So, again, kind of similar techniques for optimum health, but from a different angle. Movement, whether it's cardiovascular, meaning walking, biking, running, whatever your dancing, favorite cardiovascular exercises, and resistance training, both improve the secretion of GLP-1. So not only are you burning calories, but you're actually actively decreasing your appetite. And that actually might be the reason that exercise supports weight loss more than burning calories. There's been a lot of studies uh, lately, as in, I'm going to say the last decade, that have shown that it's not necessarily the burning of calories that causes weight loss through exercise. Resistance training adds muscle to your body, and muscle burns more calories and boosts your metabolism. Certainly, you can create a pretty big effect at doing that. My sister is a bodybuilder, and when she's preparing for a show, I mean, she's almost struggling to get up to close to 3,000 calories a day to support the muscle that she's adding to her body without losing weight. And if she can't get all the way there, then she will actually start dropping weight. So muscle can burn a fierce number of calories, and this is doing no cardio. This is just lifting weights. But the fascinating thing about this GLP-1 knowledge that we're starting to accrue is that exercise does boost the secretion of satiety hormones. It decreases your appetite, particularly resistance training. So people will often notice that if they go for really long runs and do a lot of cardio, that can make them hungrier. But if you are walking 30 to 60 minutes a day, that's not going to increase your appetite, and it is going to increase GLP-1 secretion. If you're resistance training, similar, which I think is really exciting. Managing stress also increases GLP-1. And so, obviously life is stressful and that happens to all of us, but our reaction to it has a giant impact on our hormones. Whether we're secreting adrenaline and cortisol in reaction to the stress, and that has impact on weight, and whether it's getting in the way of GLP-1. So some of the things that you can do other than trying to, solve the stressful situation to the best of your ability, of course, is deep breathing. And there's some kind of, again, I've worked with someone in the past who was a breath coach, and she was recommended to me because her breathing strategies had a very specific impact on appetite. She didn't understand exactly why. I didn't understand exactly why. We just know that lowering stress lowers hunger, and that when we're very stressed, we get very hungry. And GLP-1 is definitely turning out to be part of that. So you can, by practicing deep breathing, and there are so many different ways of doing it, and you can Google different ways of doing it, but the thing to look for in terms of mitigating stress is a longer exhale than inhale. That particular style of breathing has some pretty cool research behind it in terms of its ability to change your physiological reaction to a stressful event. And it doesn't take a long time to do it. And you can really have an effect on lowering cortisol, and I suspect on increasing GLP-1 and helping manage your appetite. So as a stressful event happens during the day, or as you tune into thinking, I feel stressed right now, you can implement a breathing strategy of, for instance, you can experiment with different ways of doing it, but breathing, deep belly breathing, in for a count of 4, holding it for a count of 5 or 6, and then slowly exhaling for a count of 7. That 4, 5, or whatever's comfortable to you for the hold, and then exhale for 7. You just practice that for and repeat it as many times as you need to feel your stress come down. And the beauty of it is that it's free. You can do it anywhere. You can train yourself to really, immediately jump into that type of breathing when you have something happen to you that surprises you, that is stressful, a message that is stressful, anything, being in traffic. When you repeat that and practice it over time, you really do affect the hormonal response in your body and your hunger and your weight. And it's pretty powerful. So I think it's really fun to experiment with. And I purposely, when I get in bed at night, I do that breathing. It does help me fall asleep better, and that leads right into the next one, which is sleep. Getting good sleep. Again, we've known for years that a poor night's sleep uh, leads to eating on average an additional 400 calories the next day. 400 calories repeated over the course of, a pound is 3,000 calories. So if you're repeating 400 extra calories day after day after day for weeks on end, uh, perfectly explains why a stressful life event that disrupts your sleep leads to gaining weight, and the reverse, which is really cool. If you start sleeping enough hours a night, you can spontaneously lose weight without changing what you're eating, because you just naturally eat fewer calories, you have more GLP-1, you have lower cortisol, and those things sort of happen without any effort for you other than getting adequate sleep. So if that breathing can, help support better sleep, that's fantastic. And I have lots of other strategies that I offer. I share on social media. I share with my coaching clients um, to help get better sleep. So, all right, let's get into the foods. I put them together into categories versus, and then I'll talk at the end about combining them. But the first category, well, the first thing I also want to note, deliciousness. It's really important to understand deliciousness. So part of the problem with ultra processed food and restaurant food is that it's crazy delicious. It's like brain on fire delicious. And our brains really note that. Like when you have a bite of something amazing, it doesn't make you full, it makes you want more. So while you might be eating something that is causing the secretion of GLP-1 and other satiety hormones, your brain will override fullness when it recognizes crazy deliciousness. And what makes crazy deliciousness is the combination, usually, of refined carbs, sugar, salt, and fat. And food companies know this very, very well. They call it the bliss point. So foods that are like Cheez-It crackers, I think, are one of those foods. Like I could, never get full of them. I could probably eat a pound of them and never feel satisfied, because it has all of those things. It also has amazing texture, like that, kind of flakiness. Oreos are another famous one. Fast food, you know how this goes. Your favorite cake, your favorite cookies, all of those kinds of things. So it's not that we don't want to have delicious food. And hey, crazy deliciousness occasionally is super fun. That's what holidays are for, special occasions, all of those things, eating in lovely restaurants. But on a regular basis, what you want to aim for is delicious, but not crazy delicious. And that will allow GLP-1 to do its job without this extra secretion of, basically hormones that override satiety and basically just prevent you from feeling full or feeling satisfied. So I just wanted to make sure to say that. I don't talk enough about that. There's a very cool book called The Hungry Brain, and it really goes into it in a lot of detail. It's pretty dense. Stephen Guyenet is the author. He's a great follow, also on social media, very brainy person, very highly respected appetite researcher. And this book basically talks about that, about how extra delicious, ultra processed food makes it almost impossible for us to maintain a healthy weight. So we want to partake in those things occasionally, but not on an everyday basis. That doesn't mean we have to hate the food that we eat, though. Liking food makes you full. Crazy loving food makes you hungry. That's sort of it in a nutshell, and hopefully that's helpful. So with that, the first category is probiotic foods. this gets to gut health. And it turns out because GLP-1 is secreted in the gut, having a healthy gut supports adequate GLP-1 secretion. Happy cells, happy gut bacteria. So healthy gut bacteria take, fiber basically from our diet, and they eat it, and they secrete various fatty acids. There's one in particular called butyrate, and there are very specific types of bacteria that secrete butyrate, and our gut loves butyrate. Butyrate is anti-inflammatory. It's very nutritious to our gut cells, and it supports effective GLP-1 production. It also supports, by the way, serotonin, dopamine, other neurotransmitters that have a lot to do with brain health, but that's a different conversation. We're going to focus on GLP-1. But this butyrate is a really important short chain fatty acid for having a healthy gut. There are two ways to get it. One, through our gut bacteria. And so we want to feed our gut bacteria, our healthy gut bacteria, whole foods, fiber in the form of legumes, color in the form of berries and greens. Those colors, those polyphenols are actually fuel for gut bacteria. Onions, garlic, they have prebiotics in them. Artichokes, those are great. Cooked and cooled starches. I talk about this a lot in my social media, but there's something called resistant starch. And if you cook things like rice and potatoes and then cool them down, the starches rearrange themselves, and some of them become indigestible to us, but they become fuel for gut bacteria. And even when you reheat the food, the resistant starches remain. And so that's a good case for batch cooking, things like potatoes and rice. Make a big, or make extra of it, pop it in the fridge. And then the next time you eat those potatoes or that rice, know that you are actually eating less carbs, which show up as less carbs on a glucose monitor, and you're providing fuel for gut bacteria. So it's just, a really nice little trick that you can use. Oats, whole grains, things like that. Those feed specifically the good bacteria that produce butyrate. And then eating foods that have those bacteria in them that are producing the butyrate. So things like sauerkraut and kimchi that have live cultures, yogurt, fantastic. Cheeses, so hard cheeses actually have a nice amount of butyrate in them. And and then some of the vegetarian proteins that are fermented, like tempeh, and miso is another one. Great. Most tofu isn't super fermented, but miso is really nice. And so you don't need to eat huge amounts of these foods. These aren't foods that you super fill up on, with probably the exception of yogurt. But they add, I've always noticed that they add an edge of satiety when I include them. Like, I'm more full from a lunch when I add a couple tablespoons of sauerkraut to it. I'm more full from a breakfast that includes some yogurt. I've definitely noticed this. Now we know why. So we're kind of chasing butyrate, basically. Another way to enhance butyrate production is to fast overnight for 12 hours. I'm not a huge fan of long intermittent fasts. I see it really get people into trouble with their gut health, really disrupts sleep, and can set up a lot of like binging later in the day. But a 12-hour fast is very doable, and it's associated with better butyrate production. So if you like that and that feels good to you, that's great. That actually kind of is the routine that I fall into pretty naturally. So those are sort of like the fibers and the probiotic foods, and they're all related to gut health and to giving good fuel. for that butyrate production. That's basically what we're going for. The next category is healthy fats. What are healthy fats? I mean, all fats are necessary. We need saturated fat. We just don't need, tons of it, or we need it in the context of other fats as well. Omega-3 fats in particular are shown to boost GLP-1, and they come from fish, uh, high quality fish oil. I suspect you don't get the same appetite suppression from high quality fish oil, which I take a couple times a week, as you do from actually eating fish. Eating the food is always going to give you a bigger effect. However, um, it is, having extra omega-3 fats is beneficial. It's also good for your gut health in a totally separate way. And then there are plant foods like nuts, seeds, flax in particular, chia in particular. Using those oils to make salad dressing, like if you use, walnut oil or hazelnut oil, keep it in the fridge. It's very fragile. It is a lovely source of both monounsaturated and omega-3 fats, and they're also tasty and great to use. And then the monounsaturated fats are olives, olive oil, avocado oil. All the recipes I write, if you follow my recipes at all or have my meal plans, I have you cooking with avocado oil and olive oil because they're great for you. And now we know that they also improve GLP-1. So that just is another reason to use them. So the saturated fat foods are not shown to boost GLP-1. That makes an argument for, I think using some butter is fantastic. You just don't have to have tons of it. I think that, eating, beef and pork, which have a little bit more saturated fat than, poultry does, using those foods in your diet is great. The trick is to have a balance. Don't cook all of your food in butter and cream and coconut oil. Cook in olive oil, cook in avocado oil, use butter because it's delicious. Use, relatively lean cuts of those other forms of meat, and you'll be great. You'll be totally, totally right in there. And incorporate fish if you can, once or twice a week. Not everyone loves it. But if you can, knowing that it not only supports heart health, definitely associated with healthy weight, and now understanding that it's got this GLP-1 connection as well. So lots of reasons to eat fish a couple times a week. So the next category is protein, which I talk a lot about. And we already know that protein is satiating for all sorts of reasons. I mean, it's hard to digest. It actually takes a lot of calories to digest. It has a ton of nutrients in it. Those things make you full all on their own. But protein foods are some of the most GLP-1 supporting foods. And so those best sources, fish, the yogurt that we discussed already, eggs and satiety have a very close connection. If you are not sensitive to eggs, including them in your diet is going to be great. Chicken, it's on people's, list of most satiating foods for lots of good reasons. Turkey, tofu, legumes are kind of, cross categories with both protein and fibers. And so, there's going to be some overlap here which will not be surprising. And as you can imagine, combining these foods in every meal is really going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And that's what I teach people without knowing about the GLP-1. I just have come to that conclusion on my own and through the science that the most filling meals, and by filling, I mean filling from meal to meal, but they also dial your appetite down over time. It changes your appetite to combine these foods in each meal. And so we all get busy, and it gets very simple, you know, uh, to maybe make a quick dish with rice and veggies and maybe throw a little bit of protein on it. And you can get full doing that. But it's not the kind of full that's going to change your appetite over time. So if you want to really powerfully use these foods, having protein and some starch and some veggies and or fruit and some healthy fat, like some nuts or avocado or olive oil or whatever. When you put all of them together in the same meal, you are going to get the strongest GLP-1 response. And you're going to notice that, because it's going to carry you for hours. But when you repeat it day after day, meal after meal, you're going to notice that your appetite changes as a person. And all of a sudden, you start to become the person that can skip a meal without even noticing it. And that used to seem very strange to me. Like back in, the 90s and the low fat days, when all I was eating was, carbs basically and no fat. And I didn't know anything about protein. I couldn't imagine skipping a meal. I was absolutely starving. I mean, I would sit at my desk. I worked in healthcare, ironically, at the time. And I, kept saltines in my desk, and I would drink diet soda all day to try to manage my appetite. And I thought people who, oh, I forgot to eat lunch were insane, basically. And now, eating this way, understanding GLP-1, understanding, these other satiety hormones, and understanding other actions of satiety, which do include things like volume and water. And, there are several ways that satiety can happen. When you do this consistently over time, it does dial your appetite down, and you do become a person who can skip a meal without feeling super stressed out about it. And I think that's beautiful. And I think we're understanding why a little bit better. So, and it's not in a depressing way, as in zero appetite. It's just, I really think of it as freedom. You just have the freedom to be able to get through your days um, without having to uh, make food decisions that you're not super psyched about. You don't have to stop at a gas station and eat something that you're not that thrilled about, but because you can wait. And I think that's fantastic. Not something to do all the time, but just having that ability is really great. So that is sort of the GLP-1 picture. Those are the GLP-1 foods. I'm going to send you a list that's very detailed of these foods. I really feel like I probably already write recipes around all of these. I was pretty excited when I read it. I don't write a lot of recipes with legumes in them. I did send one to all of you yesterday just because, and I purposely went into my website and I was like, what have I written with legumes in it? I've been adding more legumes to my diet. I try to eat some every day. And it was before the GLP-1 thing. I was really doing it because I wanted to provide that extra fuel for healthy gut bacteria. If you're not eating a lot of legumes right now, or you notice that you kind of react to them, you can start very small with like a tablespoon at a time. And then the bacteria that digest them will adjust. More of them will show up. Your body will start to handle them better. And getting to like a half a cup a day is really beneficial for appetite, for blood sugar, for cholesterol, for gut health. There's a lot of reasons to, include them with protein sources, with veggies, with berries, with nuts, and these other things. So that is sort of everything. If you have questions, you are more than willing to type them into the chat. Paula wrote, tirzepatide, did I pronounce that correctly, has way less side effects. That's really good to know. And it's individual. Like, so for some people, one will work. It requires some experimentation. It requires experimentation around the dosage and around the particular drug. So some people I mean, everyone who starts taking these medications starts at a low dose, establishes some tolerance, gets the experiment, sees how they react to it, and then you move to up the dosage so that you achieve that right amount of appetite. And for some people, they just have to let go of that particular drug and experiment with a different one because the side effects are too bad. So there could be different ways of doing it. Um, that's a great tip. Thank you. Anybody else? And you can also send me an email too. So I'm going to be writing this email this afternoon, kind of summarizing this for you. And if you think of something, let me know. But the basic takeaways, I think, are that this comes down to it comes down to gut health. It comes down to real food. And in almost every way that we talk about food, whether it's diabetes, cardiovascular disease, weight, inflammation, autoimmune disease, it kind of doesn't matter. And really, whichever one you connect with the most and whichever one means the most to you is the path. Like grab that and run with it. It's always going to point toward the same foods. And that often brings up this question: what about all the other competing messages I see about being plant-based, about keto, about carnivore? Some people are taking keto even to the next level. There's a lot of people who experiment with these different ways of eating and they end up having, really powerful health benefits from them. And I would just say that a lot of those interventions are meant to be therapeutic and can be really helpful. For someone who hasn't been very good about eating vegetables, being vegetarian for a while can really expand your horizons and get more nutrients into your body. But over time, then other nutrient deficiencies can show up related to the nutrients that are only available in animal products. I'm not saying that people have to eat meat at all. I have several clients who are vegetarian, but moderation is sort of your test. And so if anyone's, saying do this extreme thing, I think looking at it through the lens of, a short-term elimination diet and experiment and maybe kind of a gut reset can be interesting. But over time, people don't succeed, when the diet is super extreme and they tend to fall away. And so I think it makes more sense if you're kind of on the fence about where you want to go to look to people, and it doesn't have to be me, who talk about eating everything and who talk about mostly whole food, who have a plan for how to work processed food, and treats into a day because there's a space for them. Everything is a continuum. No, we don't want to be the average American getting 60% of our calories from ultra processed food. I do not mean to imply that you have to be utterly perfect and eat only whole food all the time, or only cook 100% of your own food. That doesn't work either. We live in a world that has so many options available to us, and there are prepared foods and restaurants and things that you can pick up that you can add to the foods that you're preparing at home and make really good decisions about how you add those things into your diet and save yourself time, save yourself money, get full, enjoy the food. So I just think that you don't have to worry about the extremes. You do not have to be vegan to be healthy. Um, yes, and I also would say, I do have one client who has had to use a carnivore diet as a reset because her gut was such a mess that she needed to take away all fiber for a while and kind of starve out all the bacteria in her gut. Go through a protocol of treating, these unhealthy gut bacteria that had taken up residence after many years of antibiotic use and other medications. It had a therapeutic use. It was temporary. Vegetables and fibers were reintroduced. She's doing great. So it's not that carnivore doesn't have a place, but if you're starting off the new year and you're looking for, losing some weight or, doing something uh, for your health, I would tune out the extremes to the best of your ability. And I share a ton of other people that I think have great messages. So it's another reason to follow me on Instagram. I think there are a ton of wonderful voices out there. People that make eating real food really fun. They make it make sense. I think Max Lugavere is a really interesting person to follow, and his work is great. And he's got a big platform. Um, I follow a nutritionist called College Nutritionist, and she does a lot of TikTok-y, dancey kind of stuff, but her messaging is spot on, and she makes lots of great recommendations. Or wait, College Nutritionist, more serious. Sorority Nutritionist is the other one. She's more TikTok-y, but again, I think her content is great. The thing that we all have in common is that we talk about getting full and eating the foods that get you full and get you really well nourished. And those are the voices that I would suggest that you pay attention to. So if that heads off the plant-based question, I want people to eat lots of plants and some carbs and plenty of protein and healthy fat, like all of it. All of it has a place, and it all has, benefit for appetite, and then of course for health and hormones and skin and weight and all those things. So anything else, you guys? I went over, tried to keep it to an hour. Thank you so much for, well, I probably did keep it to an hour with my screw up on the passcode. Sorry about that. And thank you for persisting and showing up anyhow. This is really fun. I'll send the recording and my notes. And I just really appreciate the questions that I get and the conversations. I love it when you answer my emails. I love it when you send me notes on Instagram. Feel free to DM me. I always write back. So thank you. I'm glad it was useful. I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation. It's for sure going to be the conversation of 2024. Like the hot health topics for 2024 are for sure going to be Ozempic, and then whatever's coming after it. They're just going to keep going and developing more and more and more potent forms of these medications. Fatty liver disease is, I put this in my Project Vibrancy Facebook group, is going to be a very hot topic for 2024. It's all the same solution, same foods. The things that help with fatty liver disease are eating real food, legumes, berries, greens. All of those things support liver health. So it's not going to be, shockingly new, but very important, because fatty liver disease is really affecting kids as well, as well as cardiovascular disease. And so you're going to see a lot about that. And I think that's good to pay attention to. And you can have tested, might not be what you usually do when you go to the doctor, but you can ask to have liver enzymes looked at. And that's not a bad idea. So anyway, there's just going to be a lot of cool things, but this is definitely going to be one of them. And I love it. I mean, I think, as I said at the beginning, if you're full, it just changes everything. It changes the decisions that you make about food during the day. And I think that it just helps you feel better about yourself. We all beat ourselves up quite a lot for succumbing to, foods that we wish that we weren't eating. And a lot of it just comes from hunger. And if you're not so hungry, it just gives you that much more control, and it gives you the ability to to feel better about the decisions you're making, and that leads to lots of better health decisions. So I think getting full is important. Cool. Well, thanks so much, you guys. I'll let you go, And I appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. If you have questions that pop up, just let me know, and I'll keep addressing them in the things that I send out. So, all right. Thanks, you guys.